Hi guys, it's Jess from FIsherman and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing all of my 5-star reads of the year. Alright guys, so before we get into all of my 5-star reads so far this year, I want to explain my rating system because I realized that I've never actually explained it on my channel, and I get a couple questions now and then for people that are looking at my Goodreads reviews and are like, why is this rated the way it's rated? So, how I rate books. First up, we have 1 star. It is unbelievably rare for me to leave a 1-star review. Typically, if there's a 1 star, it's either I was part of a read-along and I had to read this book, there was some sort of commitment that made me have to finish this book, or else I probably would have DNF'd. Now, 2 star is actually my lowest rating, and when I leave a 2-star review, I normally actually explain why I'm leaving the 2-star review. 2 star, something didn't work for me. It was either the writing or the pacing or the topic. For some reason, I did not enjoy this book. So 2 star is really like my lowest rating. And then 3 star is I liked this book. I thought it was good. Now, it either doesn't have a lot of rereadability or I probably won't recommend it very often. For some reason, this book just wasn't stand out. However, while I was reading it, I really enjoyed it. So 3 stars is actually a pretty good star rating if you're following my Goodreads. Then you get to 4 star. Now, most of the books I review, I leave 4 stars. 4 star just means I had a fabulous time. I will probably recommend this book to people. I really enjoyed it. There's nothing I can really nitpick about the book. It was just overall a really good book. So 4 stars is what I give almost every book that I end up really enjoying, and there's not like a glaringly obvious issue to why I would rate it lower. Then we have 5 star. 5 star is perfection. I will hear no criticism on these books. Even if I know there's something that probably other people aren't going to enjoy, it's just a book that I personally loved. It feels tailored towards my reading taste, and that is how I give a book 5 stars. So that is kind of how it goes. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below, but overall 5 star is still like a number 1, obviously numerical order. But these are all the books that I've given 5 stars that I absolutely loved. I will say 2023 has been a phenomenal reading year. I have a decent amount of 5-star books that I'm very excited to talk about. They're a mix of fantasy romance, dark romance, and I think there's like 2 contemporary romances on this list, and then 1 monster romance. So, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about my favorite books of the year. Alright guys, so before I start talking about all of my favorite books, I want to talk about TryTreats.com. So this package just arrived on my doorstep and I'm so excited. So TryTreats.com is a monthly subscription box and they send you different treats or snacks from around the world. So this month is Indonesia and I'm so excited to unbox this. I figured this would be the perfect date night to do with my husband where we get to try different treats. I am a notorious picky eater. However, I always want to try new things and I feel like I never know where to start, so this is perfect. You can use my discount code HONESTFICTION to save 15% off your first box. I will leave all the information down in the description below, but definitely check out TryTreats.com. This is going to be so much fun. Alright guys, so I figured the easiest way to do this was by month. So starting with January, my absolute favorite book was Gothikana by RuNyx. So this is a dark academia story, and it is absolutely addicting. So we are following Corvinia, and she's been raised by her schizophrenic mother. She's also been homeschooled, so she's not really used to like interacting with people. And when her mother passes away, she's terrified because she feels like she's an outcast, and she gets a letter from Venmore University. Now, when she eventually decides to attend Venmore, and when she gets there, she sees that it's actually this dark gothic mansion that is completely isolated and is being run by Vlad, who is the headmaster. So it is Corvina and Vlad's relationship, and it is so good. And we also have all of these like weird occurrences that are going on at Venmore University. There are some very mysterious suicides. There's also people going missing, and we're trying to figure out exactly what is going on here. And I loved this so much. First of all, student teacher, favorite trope ever. So the fact that we got student teacher, but also had those like gothic vibes, it was so good. So I highly recommend if you like dark romance and you like a little bit of like a creep factor, I would definitely check out Gothikana. Moving into February. So in February, I celebrated Fantasy Romance Feb, and I read mostly fantasy romance books, and I had an amazing time. But my two favorites were the Ballad of Never After. This is the sequel to Once Upon a Broken Heart. If you're unfamiliar with Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I talk about this way too much on my channel, we are following Evangeline Fox, and she is this girl that is madly in love with her best friend, but her best friend is planning to marry her stepsister. So Evangeline is so distraught by this. She goes to Jax, who is the fate of Broken Hearts, or the Prince of Broken Hearts, and begs him to stop the wedding. Now, it is known in this society you do not make deals with fates. However, Evangeline is just desperate, so Jax agrees as long as Evangeline will kiss 3 people of his choosing. And the story goes from there. But this second book, the sequel, is it's amazing. It's just so good. So the slow bird and the butterflies and the just kiss already, I love Jax so much. This is my favorite young adult fantasy romance. It has such a whimsical fairy tale feel. The world is just, it's so beautiful. And then on top of that, we get this angsty romance that I am just obsessed with. So highly recommend, if you have not picked up Once Upon a Broken Heart or The Ballad of Never After, definitely do so. And my other 5-star read in February was Between Wrath and Mercy by Jess Wisecup. So this is a fantasy romance. We are following Emmeline, and when she was younger, she was forced into this loveless marriage. Luckily, she does have a daughter, and her daughter is her whole world, which is why it is so upsetting when her daughter is kidnapped. So Emmeline ends up having to go to the bloody Prince Rainier, who she actually has a history with, and beg that he help her get her daughter back, and it is their story of them trying to work together to find her daughter. I loved this. First of all, we have mature characters. Both the characters in this are in their 30s, which I love because I feel like in most fantasy romance, we're following 18 and 19-year-olds or very young 20-year-olds. And in this, we have more mature characters, and you can really tell because the main character in this, first of all, is a badass, but second of all, she actually thinks through her decisions. And I feel like that is something we don't get in a lot of fantasy romance. She's not very impulsive. She's trying to figure out the best way to get her daughter back. And I just very much enjoyed this. I really need to pick up the sequel. It's been on multiple TBRs. It's just, these books are thick. But overall, I absolutely love this and highly recommend. Moving into March, I had 3 books that I rated 5 stars. First up is a step-sibling romance. So this is June 1st by Jennifer Hartmann. And I'm gonna be honest, I was not expecting to even like this book, let alone rate it 5 stars. However, this book was amazing. It made me sob uncontrollably multiple times. However, I absolutely loved it. So we are following Brant, and at the start of our story, Brant is a young kid, I think he's 8 or 9, and he ends up having to move in with his best friend's family. Now, his best friend's mother has just given birth to a baby girl named June, and Brant and June just have this incredible bond. So while they're growing up, Brant really looks out for June, and they just have this connection that slowly, as they enter adulthood, turns romantic. Now, I will say, a lot of this book is spent with them being step-siblings, so if that is something that is going to make you uncomfortable, probably don't pick this book up. Honestly, I kind of got the ick at first. However, eventually you kind of see that they never really had a step-sibling relationship. They always just had this connection that's very hard to describe. And everything Brant has gone through, you are just going to ache for this guy because he has had so many terrible things happen to him in his life that he just deserves that HEA at the end of this book. And I am so happy this is a romance and he gets that HEA because this book is heartbreaking. However, once again, absolutely loved it. Highly recommend. If you like taboo romance, definitely check out June 1st. And the next 5-star read that I read in March is A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Milla Vane. So I actually read this as part of a collab video I did with Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life. So I'll leave that video linked down in the description below and in the cards. But she ended up picking this book for me to read, and I am so happy she did because I was obsessed with this book. It is so good. It is the perfect fantasy romance if you're looking for a fantasy romance that doesn't involve fae. It also has enemies to lovers, one bed, all of the tropes I love, and the FMC is a badass. So we are following Matic, I believe is his name, and he is the prince of this like barbarian tribe. And while he is off fighting, he gets word that his parents have been killed. Now, Matic is pretty sure he knows who the killer is, so he goes and he tracks down Even, who is the daughter of his enemy. And right before he's about to kill her, Even is like, hey, we can help each other. I want to kill my parents too, let's work together. So Matic at first takes her almost as a prisoner, and he treats her kind of badly, but eventually a romance soon blossoms, and it's so good. So the female main character, Yvonne, isn't able to run. She has, I forget exactly what happened to her, but something with her leg. She's not able to do a lot of the things that Maddox, like barbarian people, need to do in order to survive, but she figures out her own way of doing things, and she's just unbelievably intelligent, and she is one of my favorite FMCs ever written. So highly recommend, if you haven't checked out this fantasy romance yet, definitely pick it up, 5-star read. And the last 5-star book for March is A Court of Blood and Bindings by Lisette Marshall. I am sure you are all so sick of me talking about this book, so to keep it very brief, this is a fantasy romance. We are following Emmeline. She is a human girl that is living on the Human Islands. Now, the Human Islands are controlled by the Fae Islands, and the Fae Isle is controlled by the Mother. Now, why is the Mother so powerful? She is someone who's able to use color magic. Also, a few of the other Fae are also able to use this ability where they can pull colors from objects to create magic. So if you want destruction, you pull from red. If you want healing, you pull from green or yellow. And you could actually mix these colors together to create completely unique magic. So anyway, the Mother is the biggest and baddest Fae in town. However, she has a henchman named the Silent Death, who is also absolutely terrifying. So our main character one day wakes up, her entire human village is on fire, and standing above her is the Silent Death himself. Now, it is the best fake dating fantasy romance I've ever read, and also I love our male main character. So he is unable to use his voice. So at the beginning, he's like writing everything down in order to communicate to Emmeline, but eventually she teaches him how to use sign language. And it's just, I love this story. I love the magic. It is so unique. I love the romance. And towards the end, it does get pretty spicy. And I will say the second book, Lord of Golden Glory, the spice definitely goes up a notch. So highly recommend. If you're a fan of ACOTAR, I think you will really enjoy this book. And moving into April, I had 2 5-star reads. So first up, we have The Coven by Harper L. Woods. This is a dark, witchy fantasy romance, and I absolutely love this. Now, this is one of those 5-star reads that I know not everyone is going to enjoy. I've actually had friends that have read this. I have friends that DNF'd this. There are definitely issues with this book. However, I stand by my 5-star rating. I loved everything about this. We have student teacher, which I love, forbidden, taboo. We have a dark gothic setting, and honestly, parts of this book felt like a horror. And then we have witchy elemental magic. Everything about this book I loved. So we are following Willow, and she is the daughter of a witch that faked her own death to live in secret from the Coven. Now, the Coven is this group of essentially witch skeletons that kind of control this school, and they kind of rule over all of the witches. Now, the Coven also has vessels, which are these soulless, kind of like vampires that they control, but the vessels are almost like second-class citizens to the Coven of witch skeletons. Anyway, Willow's mother ends up passing away, and the Coven finds out that she exists, and they want her to go to school at their university. So they send Gray, who is a vessel and the headmaster of the school, to go get Willow. He brings her back, and it is their story. There's also mysteries that have to be uncovered. There's also bones that we are searching for, and it is just a glorious dark gothic time, and I love this. So if you love elemental magic and you love like taboo forbidden romance in your fantasy romance, definitely check out The Coven. And the other 5-star read for April was Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I was really late with reading this, but I did end up really enjoying it. So we are following Oria, and she is this human girl that has been raised by the king of the vampires. So he ended up finding Oria when she was a young girl, takes her back to his home, and raises her as his daughter. Now, Oria has grown up surrounded by vampires, and obviously this has not been a great life for her. So although her father is the king, it's still been very dangerous growing up. So when she gets the chance, she decides to enter the Chiari, I believe is the name of it, which is these deadly trials where the winner and the only survivor of these trials ends up being granted a wish from the goddess Nyaxia. So our main character, Oria, ends up joining these trials, and that's pretty much where this book starts. It just drops you right into the trials, and she ends up having to team up with someone from another vampire clan, and it goes from there, and it's great. I will say the romance isn't really at the forefront of most of this book. I thought this was going to be much more romance heavy, just because so many people compare it to ACOTAR and FBAA, and I understand why there is that comparison. However, know going into this, you're gonna get a lot of action, you're gonna get a lot of like vampires and danger, but the romance is kind of like an afterthought and really happens more towards the end. I have heard that the second book or the sequel is a little bit more romance heavy. However, I still really enjoyed this. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars. So definitely check this out. If you haven't yet, it was really, really enjoyable. Moving into May. So May, I had 3 5-star reads, including my top read of the year. So I don't see any book coming close to being as good as this book. I'm obsessed. I have no words. Just read this if you have not yet. And that is Mancled by SenlinYu. So this is the first fanfiction I ever read. It is Hermione/Handmaid's Tale fanfic. This bind-up was so kindly gifted to me by Melody from Mel Binds Fix. So she is a wonderful, wonderful human and just an angel, and thank you so much. I literally make everyone who walks into my house just look at this book because I am obsessed with it. It is so pretty in person. I'm sure it's pretty on camera, but trust me, in person, it's even prettier. But anyway, this story is following Draco and Hermione. So it's what would have happened if Voldemort won the war and Harry Potter ended up dying. So Hermione has been in isolation for years, and I mean complete isolation, total darkness, no human interaction. And when she emerges from the isolation, she finds out that she's going to be part of Voldemort's breeding program because magic has been waning. There's not as many children being born with magic. So Voldemort is trying to give very powerful magical witches to wizards in hopes that more powerful children will be born. So Hermione, being an incredibly strong witch, ends up being given to Voldemort's High Reeve, who is Voldemort's henchman. And we find out that the High Reeve is actually Draco Malfoy, and it is their romance, and it is fantastic. I will say this book is incredibly long, if you can't tell, but there's nothing in this book that I think you could omit. This book is perfect the way it is. If you are somebody who primarily listens to audio, like me, you can listen to this at Audiobook Warriors, which is on Spotify. You can also check out YouTube. They have it up there. I will say the epilogue is not no one recorded the epilogue as far as I can find, but you have to read the epilogue. It is very important. A lot happens. Don't skip the epilogue, and I am someone who hates epilogues. Please do not skip it. But overall, I love this book. It's absolutely amazing. 5 stars. And like many of you, I also read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros in May. I gave this 5 stars. I thought this book was so much fun. If you're unfamiliar with the plot, we are following Violet Sorrengail. She grew up thinking that she was going to become a scribe. However, her mother decides that no daughter of hers is going to become a scribe. Instead, she's going to become a dragon rider like the rest of her family. So most of this book is taking place with Violet being dropped into this dragon rider university and having to stay alive, despite the fact that 1, dragons are super dangerous, 2, all of the other cadets kind of want to kill each other for less competition, and 3, she is part of this very illustrious family, and everyone kind of wants to kill her. So I loved this. I don't know if it's quite worth the amount of hype that it was getting. I think whoever was in charge of marketing did an amazing job with this book. I mean, the sprayed edges. This book is unbelievably popular. However, it's fun. It's a good story. I can't wait to read the sequel. I got butterflies while reading this. It is very fast-paced. It's a very easy read. So I highly recommend. I understand that it's kind of controversial right now with a lot of the booktube space just because it is so overly hyped. But overall, I thought this was a very fun read. And the last 5-star read I read in May is actually thanks to Jen from the Book Refuge. So Jen and I did a collab where we picked each other's TBRs, and Jen picked out Soul Eater by Lily Mayne. Actually, that's a lie. She didn't. She picked out Ensnared by Tiffany Roberts, and I really enjoyed that book, and I asked her if she had any other monster romances, and then she said this one. So technically, she didn't pick this for the video, but she is who I got the rec from. But anyway, that video will be linked in the cards and in the description. But I love this book so much. I was not expecting to feel the way I did while reading this book. So we are following Dani, and this is post-apocalyptic. In the world that Dani lives in, monsters suddenly appeared and kind of killed everyone. So you either joined a community or you joined the military to stay alive. So Dani has just joined the military. He's kind of nervous. He's not really a killer. And on his first mission, he has to kill Wynn, who is this terrifying monster that shows up every 3 years or so and sucks the life out of people to the point that they are just husks. So anyway, Danny and his group try to kill Wynn. However, Danny just can't bring himself to do it. So he ends up passing out while all the other soldiers are firing at this monster. And when he wakes up, he finds out that he is the only survivor. So eventually, Wynn ends up escaping from the military, and it's him and Danny together kind of journeying through this post-apocalyptic landscape. And I love them. I love them so much. So I will say, if you listen to the audiobook, which is how I listened to this book, Danny has a very, very strong accent. And in the beginning, I couldn't stand it. I don't know what it was, but for some reason I was like, I hate this book. But now I can't picture Danny without his southern accent. I absolutely love it. I actually heard the narrator doing something else and I was like, oh my gosh, he needs his accent back. But anyway, I love this book. Wynn and Danny just have this beautiful bond because Wynn is just this very quiet monster and Danny is just a love bug. He's just an adorable human and I loved their relationship. So if you're looking for a monster romance, highly recommend. This is by far my favorite. It was such a beautiful story. Moving into June. So June was another month that I had multiple 5-star reads. And to start off, we have Order of the Scorpions by Ivy Asher. This is a dark, why choose fantasy romance that deserves so much more hype. I love this book, and I had no idea this book even existed. A subscriber ended up putting it in one of my stories, and I am so happy they did because I loved this book. So this is following Osset, and at the start of her story, she ends up waking up in this cage with no memory of who she is. So she is eventually given to this almost like gladiator type camp where she is supposed to learn how to become a blade slave or just like a really good assassin. And these blade slaves are auctioned off to different like assassin factions or groups, and they're used to kill, and eventually they hope to like buy their freedom. So Osset is training to be this blade slave. She's amazing at killing, and she ends up being taken by the Order of the Scorpions, which is one of the scariest assassin houses there is. So it's these 3 different scorpions, and they all have like different kind of dark powers, and it's her romance with them. But on top of that, we're still trying to figure out who Osset is. So while we're having this whole why choose romance, which is completely addicting, we also are following Osset as she tries to figure out her history, who she is, why does she have no memories, and everything like that. And this was just such an enjoyable book. I will say it did feel like I read an entire series when I finished this just because of the length. However, I think the pacing is spot on. I was never bored and I just loved this book. So highly, highly recommend. And next up is another age gap romance. So we have The Naked Fisherman by Jewel E. Ann, specifically the first book. The second book I only gave 4 stars. But I got this rec from Cheyenne from the channel That Tall Book Girl. I knew she absolutely loved this duet, so I was very excited to pick it up, and I loved it, despite being very frustrated with the main character. So the story is following Reese, and at the beginning of the story, her mother ends up going to jail. So Reese is raised by her very conservative grandparents. Now, Reese ends up being very naive to outside life. She's also a little bit judgmental because of the way she was raised. However, her mother ends up being released from jail, and Reese decides to go live with her mother before she goes off to college, just to kind of get that bond back. However, when she gets there, she finds out that her mother has some work commitments, so she is going to be left in the care of her mother's landlord, FIsherman, and it is their romance. And it is so good. So, like I said, the main character is a little bit judgmental, so she kind of has to learn about life, and FIsherman helps her out with that. And also the angst and the slow burn of this book. I have never had a book where I just needed these 2 people to get together intimately so badly, so badly. It is teased so many times without actually happening. Oh my gosh. But overall, I absolutely love this. I will say I liked the second book as well. However, it features a trope I absolutely despise, or else that probably would have also been a 5-star read. But if you're looking for an age gap romance, definitely check this duet out. And the last 5-star read I read in June is Heartbreak Warfare by Heather Organ and Kate Stewart. So this is a military romance, and unlike all of the other books I talked about, I will not reread this book. This was definitely a 5-star read. It was amazing. I have no interest in ever going back and rereading it. It caused me more emotional damage than any other book I've ever read. So the story is following Katie, and she is happily married to her husband, and they are both in the military. Katie has just had a son, and she's going on her first deployment since having her son. Now, her and her husband are like absolutely madly in love and they're crying and they're trying to figure out what they're gonna do with being separated for so long, but they have a very strong marriage. So she ends up being deployed, goes, I believe, to Baghdad and ends up becoming friends with some of the other soldiers, and she's writing to her husband every day. And then she is taken captive as a prisoner of war along with another soldier, and they go through torture and just horrible, horrible things. If you've read Still Beating by Jennifer Hartmann, kind of similar to like what goes on there. But anyway, she has to deal with this torture and this trauma for weeks with this one soldier, and eventually when she leaves, she is no longer in love with her husband. She is in love with this soldier because of the trauma that they suffered together. And she has to figure out what she's gonna do because her husband is a wonderful man, but the soldier that she just suffered with, they have this connection now. And it's such a heartbreaking story because both men are absolutely amazing. You also have this young son involved. And it's you feel for Katie because she has an impossible decision on her hands. So anyway, I love this book. We'll never reread this book. However, if you have not read it yet, you need to. And it is currently July 7th when I am filming this. However, I already know what my favorite read for July is going to be. And that is Heartless Heathens. And this is by Santana Knox. Now, this is another one that not all of you are gonna enjoy this book. It is so dark. Definitely check trigger warnings. And I mean that with my whole heart. Check all of the trigger warnings before you go into this book. Super dark, some uncomfortable topics. I loved this so, so much. So this is a dark Why Choose kind of Hunchback of Notre Dame reimagining where we're following this girl that has been raised in a bell tower by Father Frodo. It's also post-apocalyptic. So the Catholic Church is pretty much like taken over the government and everyone's being raised like very religious, very conservative. So our main characters are three heathens who are trying to pretty much take down the current government / church. And anyway, the head of this is Frodo, and he has this girl that's been locked in his bell tower for years. Everyone at this university where the bell tower is at thinks there's just a ghost living in the bell tower. But anyway, the heathens end up going to this bell tower, they find this girl, and they're like, hey, we're gonna take care of you and teach you about things. And that's what they do. And the story goes from there. Like I said, Why Choose? Super spicy. This kind of reminded me of The Losers by Harley Laroux a little bit. I honestly like this book better. However, once again, check the trigger warnings. There are things, there's a lot of things that happen in this book, but I loved it. I loved it so much. It is so dark. I loved Romina. I loved how much she changes throughout this book. I loved all of the guys, which is so rare with Why Choose, because normally I have like a favorite. Honestly, they all bring something to the table and they're all amazing and they all have very unique personalities and they're all fleshed out. This book is so good. So highly recommend if you have not picked this up and you like dark gothic romances and you checked the triggers, then definitely read this. It is so, so good. All right, guys, that's it. Those are all my 5-star reads so far this year. Please let me know down in the comments below, what is your absolute favorite book you've read this year? And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.